U.S. congressmen are meeting with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen as tensions in Asia are heating up. The delegation includes Representatives Ro Khanna, Tony Gonzalez, Jake Anchiclaus, and Jonathan Jackson. This meeting also comes as the U.S. and China are at odds over the recent alleged Chinese spy balloon. Unfortunately, the possibility of war is on the table, and it has many Americans worried. So Rasmussen reports asked, quote, if China were to invade Taiwan, would you support or oppose the United States imposing economic sanctions on China? The results were pretty decisive. 60% said they would strongly support this, while only 5% said they would strongly oppose it. Rasmussen reports also asked, quote, if China were to invade Taiwan, would you support or oppose the United States sending ground troops to defend Taiwan? 17% said they would strongly support it. 26% said they would somewhat support it. 23% said they would somewhat oppose it. And 23% said they would strongly oppose it. 12% said they weren't sure if they would support or oppose the United States sending ground troops to defend Taiwan. So with all of that, let's bring in Rasmussen Reports head pollster Mark Mitchell to break all this down for us. Mark, I want to start with the questions about sanctions. We had talked about, before how many Americans now feel that we might be headed to war with China. That's definitely trended upward. And look, with all the foreign policy analysts I talked to and experts on China like Gordon Chang, they also feel there's more of a possibility now than ever. And I think people are looking at ways now to mitigate, right? So talking sanctions, tell us what we found out here.
Well, thanks for having me on to talk about this. It was actually on your show when I realized we had never actually asked about Taiwan. And I think we can be forgiven because one of the things we covered was that, before the Trump administration, the American people really didn't see China as an enemy. And they really woke up to the fact that they don't have our best interests in mind. 15% said China was an enemy back in 2017, and very recently it was 48%. So this is a relatively new realization for Americans. What we did here was a technique we love to do in polling is to ask questions in an escalating manner to see where people draw the line and where division starts to sneak in the public opinion. Because Americans are overwhelmingly in favor of and complete bipartisan support for sanctions on China. 79% of likely voters support the sanctions, only 12% oppose, and the party numbers are all almost identical. So if you look at that question in a vacuum, it's not very interesting. But if you keep upping it, okay, well, now are we going to defend Taiwan with our Navy? Are we going to send in the Air Force? And finally, are we going to put boots on the ground? Well, Americans draw the line at boots on the ground. But I think what I can show you, too, is also the Democrat Party is starting to become the party of war, very specifically the Biden component of the Democrat Party. So now on sanctions, like I said, bipartisan support and, men and women mostly agree. And really the strongest signal was that younger voters are less likely to want sanctions, but they still support them by 66%. Maybe that's they're more tech enabled. Maybe that's they're less, geopolitically involved. Who knows? But there's a real signal. And that one, as we'll see, is going to flip too. So now if we go to the Navy, there's less support, but 64% of U.S. likely voters still support the Navy defending Taiwan. So that's an overwhelming majority. And still, by complete bipartisan support, Democrats 65%, Republicans 63%. Next one, Air Force. We're down to 63%, still overwhelming support. But now the cracks are starting to appear in the party numbers. Democrats 67%, Republicans 62%, and it's actually independents at 52%. So independents are saying, well, wait, bombing China with our Air Force, that sounds, maybe we don't want to do that. And then finally, if China were to invade Taiwan, would you support or oppose the United States sending ground troops to defend Taiwan? 43%, so less than a majority of U.S. likely voters support it, only 17% strongly, and 45% oppose. So it's relatively split, but it can't be said that a majority of Americans support it. And also, when we asked a year ago a similar question about Ukraine, only 31% of U.S. likely voters supported sending troops to defend Ukraine from Russia. So there is more sensitivity of wanting to defend China from Taiwan, but people do not. They're not clamoring to get involved in a war. But here are the party numbers. Republicans, 39% of Republicans support defending Taiwan with our troops, and 49% are opposed. Democrat, 51% support, and only 37% are opposed. And who of any of the demographics has the strongest signal, who wants war most with China? It's those who strongly approve of Joe Biden. 57% of people who strongly approve of Joe Biden want to defend Taiwan with China. And as you recall from our discussion previously, Democrats are actually least likely to think China is an enemy. So only 30% of Democrats say China is an enemy. And when asked to list the biggest enemy that faces America, Democrats put China number 3 on the list, below Republicans. And yet here the people who strongly approve of Biden are the ones that more than anybody else want to see our troops defending Taiwan.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing this trend, right? And this is a really great poll example. I'll probably send to, I have liberal friends, to my liberal friends who are complaining about the neoliberals in their parties, just as Republicans complain about a lot of the neocons who are always wanting to go to war.
Oh,
so this is a very important poll across the board.
Give me one more number.
Go ahead.
Self-identified liberals. Only 42% of them support defending Taiwan with troops. And that's almost the same as the Republican number. So it's those people who strongly approve of Biden in the Democrat Party who are not self-identified liberals. Those are the ones that want war.
Yeah, very interesting. This is a very interesting poll. Thanks so much for doing this, Mark. I love it. Thanks for doing this. We'll keep
giving
following
us good ideas.
I'll do my best.